Welcome to the Exam Study Expert Podcast, helping you ace your exams at school and university through the psychology of high performance and the science of studying smarter, not harder. It's my pleasure to introduce your host, the Cambridge-trained memory psychologist and exam success coach, William Wadsworth.
Hello and welcome to the show, and to the second of 4 mini-episode pep talks I'm bringing you over the next couple of weeks. Our first instalment in this little series was yesterday, in which I invited you to strive to continually improve and level up your skills as a scholar, with a wider lesson beyond academics that this approach to continually improving your skills, even the ones that you're getting quite good at, or even seriously good at, is a pretty handy approach for serious success in life generally. Today's episode is designed to serve as something of a counterpoint to that, in which I want to be talking about releasing you from, at times, an overwhelming need to prepare perfectly, to have ticked everything off, to know everything you could know, to practice every question you could practice, or read every source you can. Now, releasing you from this overwhelm is not a get-out-of-jail-free card that lets you off doing the work. Rather, this is about making peace with what is possible when the maths of how much you have to do simply does not fit into the time you have available. We can use gains in productivity and efficiency, how you approach your work, your focus, your time hacks, how you approach your learning and your memory strategy. We can use all of that to effectively find some extra hours each day for you. But that can only take us so far. We cannot magically increase the available time beyond the standard 168 hours per week, and there may come at a point where you have optimized your efficiency to the max, and when your ambitions for what you need to do simply do not fit into the time you have remaining. Now, again, this is a counterpoint, but I don't think a contradiction to yesterday's episode. Per yesterday, I still want to encourage you to add to your skill set and hone your craft as a scholar, or any other domain that's important to you in your academic or professional career. But today's message is all about what to do when you face those times where the time task maths is simply impossible and you need to make hard choices. This often affects high achievers at some point, and I know there's a good chunk of high achievers among the Exam Study Expert podcast listener base. So we're talking again about the times where you need to make peace with the fact that you haven't done every practice question available, you haven't used every prep resource available, you haven't read every new source on your list, you haven't memorised every last detail that could be on the exam, or maybe you were planning to do 4 rounds of spaced repetition and it turns out you might only have time to do 2. All of these things. When our ambition doesn't match the time available, it can really hurt. There's a desperation to kind of cling on to what you think you need to do, what you should do, particularly if you've been working yourself really hard to achieve that for a long time. It's a hard pivot to make. It's often a conversation I end up having with students at some point or other. Usually we spend the time to optimize their time management strategy, their learning strategy. We do all of that first. And sometimes that's enough to make the available time enough to tackle the task we've got. But sometimes it's not. In those times, there are 4 things to bear in mind which can really help with the pain of prioritization. Number 1, ask yourself, where have the things that you think you should do, where did they come from? Where did you get those ideas? Often, when I talk to people who are overwhelmed by what they have to do, say, overwhelmed by all the different resources they should use, or all the different study methods they want to use to prepare for an exam, or all the different things they should read for an assignment. When I dig into that, I find that they have had input from multiple peers and mentors. Each of those advisors was well-meaning, but might have had a slightly different personal experience about what has worked, or has different experience about what's worked for the students they've advised in the past. There could be multiple different routes up the mountain, multiple different routes to success. Any one of these approaches individually might make plenty of sense. But when we try and add them together, there's no human way you can follow every path simultaneously. You can't follow 8 different paths up the mountain all at once. You don't need to use this study technique and this study technique and this study technique all at the same time. pick one or the other. Either is fine, but if you try and do everything because different people have said they're all important and they all help, it's not going to work. Similarly, you can't read this textbook and this one and then look at these notes and then watch this review webinar and then use these flashcard decks and. You could choose maybe a couple of these resources and be fine, but you don't need to use them all just because someone at some point has said one of those resources is going to be helpful. Take advice on board and then choose what's right for you. So think about which approach or combination of approaches is going to give you the best chance of getting the results you're looking for in your learning time available. Sometimes advice comes at you quite strongly, quite firmly, and we need to stand guard and not let it wobble us and not let it shake our conviction. Perhaps it does. Perhaps we do decide to reprioritize based on advice, but make that decision carefully and ultimately come up with the plan that's going to be best for you. Number 2. For some of you, it can be a comforting thing to remember that your remaining prep time before the exam or deadline might not be linearly distributed over the remaining days on the calendar. This one comes up surprisingly often, so let me just explain. It won't apply to everybody, but often there is an element of this. So in many cases, your available prep time per day might balloon suddenly in the final days or weeks before an exam or deadline. As you hit a period of study leave, when your normal lessons or work commitments, if you're a professional, are paused, or simply your other commitments scale back as you focus increasingly on that exam or deadline. For example, you might be going from maybe sort of an hour and a half per day up to 8 hours per day if you suddenly hit a period of study leave. So in just one day of study leave, you might cover what you're normally used to covering across an entire week of study. So don't let those days falling off the calendar spook you. You may have quite a bit more usable prep time left than it feels just by your sense of the weeks passing before the deadline or the exam. Number 3, and perhaps most importantly, you do not need to score 100% to do well, and often really, really well. No student I have ever coached has needed 100% to achieve their goal in their exam, whether that's to get the pass, get the A, get the distinction, get the first class, get the 9, get the 5.0, or whatever their goal is in that exam. They do not need 100%. Now, this means you are allowed to get stuff wrong in the exam, and you will still get that fabulous result that you are dreaming of. Typically, we can actually afford to get a pretty big chunk of the exam wrong and still walk away with an outstanding result. This means that if we skip over a few details, maybe if we deprioritize entire topics, we can still achieve really well. Now, again, this isn't about being lazy about it. Again, this message is for those of you that are already using their time really well, working in high gear, filling the available time to the max, and have already deployed all the productivity tricks and learning hacks to make as much progress in the time they have. And when the maths still isn't coming out, there's still more to do that fits in the budget of time remaining before the exam. Be reassured that you do not need 100% to pass. It's okay to be expecting bits to be able to come up on the exam, and you won't know them, and that's okay, as long as you've used the time that you do have to the best of your ability. Hey, if you end up running ahead of schedule, you can always come back to some of the bits you crossed off in any extra time that you find you have down the line. And what I would say is that as difficult as this choice might be for you now, ultimately, if your work isn't fitting into the available time, it's important to consciously choose to prioritize which elements you're going to keep and which elements you're going to cross off. And again, the bits you deprioritize might really hurt to let go of, but if you don't make that choice and instead you stick your head in the sand, you're going to be forced into letting go of some tasks at some point. Only this time, you're getting the choice made for you. You didn't get to choose the way you did it and which tasks you do and don't do. It's far better to stay in control, and as painful it is, you are the one that's choosing what to let go of rather than the choice being made for you. Now, this theme of prioritization and making peace with what you can do and can't do is, as you might be able to pick up, quite a common conversation I have with many of my coaching clients. So if you have been affected by any of the issues raised in this podcast, please do get in touch. It'd be great to have a chat and see how I might be able to help you. The way to get in touch is at examstudyexperts.com/ coaching, and you can either send me a message or book a time to have a quick chat. Again, that's examstudyexpert.com/coaching. Also, just to say that if you enjoyed this pep talk, I think you might rather like my mindset course for sophisticated students and learners of all kinds. It's called The Scholar's Way. And there's lots more content along these lines, structured into a really nice little 30-day mindset program with a daily mini lesson and exercise. Check it out at examstudyexpert.com/TSW. That's TSW for The Scholar's Way, examstudyexpert.com/TSW. Thank you so much, as always, for listening today. It's been a pleasure to have your company and wishing you every success, as always, in your studies.